Full disclosure, the SNES Classic was provided to me by Nintendo, but the NES Classic I purchased myself with cold hard cash. Guess who's got 2 miniature Nintendo consoles and learned that his shotgun microphone doesn't work anymore? It's this guy. Today we're going to review the NES Classic and the recently released SNES Classic. This new classic line of Nintendo systems is so interesting to me. It isn't hard to find easy ways to play old Nintendo games. With the NES alone, you could play it on your old NES, you could get those GBA classic titles, the e-reader titles, the NES games that you can play inside of Animal Crossing, and of course there's the Virtual Console on the Wii, Wii U, or 3DS. The list just goes on. And it goes without saying that old Nintendo games are among the most emulated of all time. And the concept of a plug-and-play console with retro games isn't that new either. I've seen stuff like this for the Atari and Sega systems for what feels like the last decade. So why then were people so excited over the $60 NES Classic alongside this year's new $80 SNES Classic? Looking at both systems, the first major draw is the presentation. They're shrunken down to an adorable size that can fit in your hands, but both of the classic systems look identical to their old counterpart systems, down to the power and reset buttons functioning in the same ways for both the NES and the SNES. And even without the function, it's easy to see the appeal of the form. They look great on display, and they're easy to bring over to a friend's house and just plug in and play via HDMI. The controllers for each system are also identical to the originals and feel just as good. The NES Classic comes with just a single controller with the option to purchase a second one separately, while the SNES uses part of its $20 price increase to give you a second controller straight from the box. They also use the exact same connectors, so if you happen to own both consoles, you can actually use the one from the SNES on the NES. I've never owned one, but I guess you can also use the Wii Classic controller to fit this slot as well. But despite looking great, the controller is actually my #1 classic complaint, and that's because of this bad boy right here. The NES Classic cable is only around 2.5 feet long, which is 3 times shorter than the original NES. And the SNES is slightly longer at 4.5 feet, but I find that both of these are just simply too short to work with modern era TVs. Using ratings.com as a guideline, they recommend going 5 and over feet away from your TV as you use TVs that are bigger than 32 inches. We sit a good 8 feet away from my TV, and using these controllers while sitting normally is just impossible. The only way I can play this thing right now is by sitting on the floor. It's just a mess. There are third-party wireless controllers and controller extenders that you can buy, but the fact that you would even consider paying more for these consoles just to use them comfortably is a little ridiculous. But assuming you don't mind sitting close to your TV or purchasing a third-party add-on, let's check out these systems in action. Both the NES and SNES use a very simple interface, with clean box art and sorting options to go through each library. Both have 3 viewing modes, 4:3, Pixel Perfect, and a CRT emulator. I personally like the CRT scanlines effect for the NES and 4:3 for the SNES. Both systems offer the ability to create up to 4 save states per game at any time by hitting the reset button. Unfortunately, if you do want to quickly swap between games, there's no way to do it on your controller. You have to go back to your console and hit that physical reset button. The SNES Classic adds a few bonuses that go a long way. One new addition is to add wallpaper around the edges of your 4:3 game to fill that full HD screen. I personally really enjoyed this city skyline one, and I kept it the whole time I played. It also comes with a truly insane feature. When you hit reset, you can rewind the last 45 seconds of gameplay and return to any point that you want in that span. Every game that you play on the SNES Classic is now Prince of Persia, letting you rewind and cheat death, or just take another stab at that power-up you missed. Even if you don't like the idea of cheating, simply using it to rewind and rewatch really cool gameplay moments is a welcome addition to the system. But hey, you're getting these systems to play some games, right? Let's take a look at the lineup of both. The NES Classic comes with 30 games, while the SNES only comes with 21. Despite the fact that both of these systems have hundreds of titles in their libraries, I really feel like both systems use their smaller selection to cover nearly every must-have game. The NES favors more pick-up and play style titles, built around collecting or getting a high score, just trying to get as far as possible in the game before you get a game over. It's a good taste of the foundation of Nintendo's major franchises, showing off the very first Super Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and others. I also find it interesting that the SNES Classic is the one that comes bundled with 2 controllers, because the NES has more co-op and head-to-head titles that use 2 controllers well, like Ice Climbers, Double Dragon, Tecmo Bowl, and Balloon Fight. If I had to pick some of the best titles that I think the NES Classic is missing, I would have liked to see Tetris, Metal Gear, and a few more sequel games like Castlevania 3 or Mega Man 3. It's great for parties with its simple control scheme and very short playtime for each game. The SNES Classic, despite having 9 less games, has a vastly superior library in my opinion. NES games haven't aged extremely well, but a wide majority of Super Nintendo greats are critically acclaimed and still look good today. It does have less party appeal, with most of its titles focused on a long single-player campaign, but this one system holds some of the greatest games of all time. On the core Nintendo end, games like Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Kirby Superstar, and A Link to the Past are considered by many to be the best entries in their entire franchises. There's also an incredible focus on RPGs this time around, with Final Fantasy III, 6, Super Mario RPG, Earthbound, and Secret of Mana all present, giving you hundreds of hours and stories that are still talked about to this day. One huge, blatantly missing title here is Chrono Trigger, but otherwise they brought the best of the best for this category. The main talking point for the console, though, is that it's the first debut for the previously scrapped SNES title, Star Fox 2. You actually have to beat one level of Star Fox 1 to unlock playability for Star Fox 2 on the system. The game was essentially finished and ready to release, but it was ultimately canned because its development ended so close to the launch of the new Super Mario 64. And I kinda get why. Here's Star Fox 2, planned to release in 1995. Now here's Star Fox 64, which dropped 2 years later. I'm not gonna lie, Star Fox is such an ugly game to revisit. This 3D effect was revolutionary at the time, but unlike classic sprite work, it just hasn't aged well. That said, I find Star Fox 2 to be vastly better and more interesting than the original. It includes a better reticle with charge shots, all-range mode, better maps, the Walker transformation, and a unique real-time map system that gives you true freedom about how you want to complete your journey. I finished my easy playthrough for this game in around half an hour, and I actually can't wait to try some new routes and higher difficulties to see what new surprises I can find in this crazy overworld. You can really see how this game paved the foundation for future games, like Star Fox 64, Star Fox Command, and even Star Fox Zero. Besides Chrono Trigger, the other must-have games I think this system is missing are more Donkey Kong Country games and ActRaiser. But even without tampering with the system in any way to change its library, I think the SNES Classics library is great, and it's probably the way I'll be introducing many of these classic games to my children someday. And closing this review, I think it's important to talk about the big thing that makes these things infamous: scarcity. The NES Classic was criminally understocked, leading to one of the most frustrating Nintendo product launches of all time. While it retailed for $60, its lack of production and shipments have led it to go up to $150 or more on the secondary market right now. It's unfortunate to see that Nintendo hasn't realized the popularity of its own products, but it seems like they are working hard to fix this mistake with the SNES Classic. I polled followers on Twitter, and while some stores were certainly short on supply, the common theme here was that many major retailers looked like they had 50 to 100 plus units available. That's a lot better than the 5 or less that I saw for most stores for the NES Classic. Theoretically, these will also see another print run as well, so I'm hoping that anyone interested in this console will be able to buy it for the actual $80 price tag within the next half year or so. All in all, it was actually really fun to play through both of these. I think that they have a great format. It's awesome to bring over to your friends. It's awesome to introduce people to these games that have never played these games before, and it's a good way to replay some old classics in a form factor that's honestly really great. The controllers are garbage. They're absolute garbage. I will probably buy one of those extenders because they are so garbage. But overall, I do enjoy the consoles, and who knows? If Nintendo can actually keep stocking this thing, maybe we'll continue to get more versions of it. Like this bad boy right here. But smaller. Because it's big, but then they make the small one and then you buy it for like money. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. More Nintendo content.